So this virtual workshop is brought to you guys in partnership through the Doherty Fresh program, which is a partnership between the Doherty County Board of Commissions, Flint River Fresh, as well as the UGA Cooperative Extension, and is made possible through funding of the Healthy Cities, Healthy County Challenge through the Aetna Foundation. So Flint River Fresh, who are we? We're 501c3 based out of Doherty County, but our work spans throughout Southwest Georgia and throughout the state of Georgia. But we're currently doing work in 4 counties in particular, Colquitt, Doherty, Houston, as well as Sumter County. And our work is based upon what we call our 4 pillars. So pillar number 1 is really focused on food access, making sure that our neighbors have access to fresh, affordable, healthy food options in their community. Our second pillar is about local ag and economic opportunities. So we work with local farmers, create opportunities to purchase directly from the farmer and bring what they grow directly into our communities. And then our third pillar, we focus on youth development. And so we work with young people, teaching them the importance of agriculture, entrepreneurship, and really empowering them to be agents of change in their communities. It's really spearheaded and led a lot through our farm to school work that we do. And our last pillar is about conservation. Flint River Fresh, we are the urban agricultural arm for the Flint River Soil Water Conservation District. And so we go out and provide technical assistance to assist people that are beginning farmers that are just getting started and showing them ways that they can protect, conserve, respect our natural resources. So you guys are here today to learn how to build our raised garden beds. And so why do we do these raised garden beds? I forgot what the other thing. So as a whole, since we've been in existence for like 5 years, Flint River Fresh has constructed over 300 of these raised garden beds that I'm going to teach you guys virtually how we construct them, how we build them, on and so forth. So why do we do the beds? Number 1, just accessibility. Being that these beds are elevated off the ground, it makes it easier for those that might have health issues to be able to bend down and take care of them. It also just allows for you be able to put it in a space or location that's easier for you like to walk to tend to, and to care for it. The second reason is that if you construct it the way that we explained through this workshop, it's also a weed barrier. So it minimizes the amount of work that you'll have to do as far as weeding it and maintaining it the way that it's constructed. Third, soil compaction. So by this being elevated and us bringing in the soil that we use, we don't have to worry, and it's designed for us not to walk in and out of the garden bed. It's designed for you to be able to reach. And because of that, you have less soil compaction, which really helps with keeping the soil alive. Third, good drainage, because again, it being elevated allows for like the water not to be settled in one spot in one location, allows for like the excess water to be able to drain through the bottom of it. So, and I explain to people, you want good drainage just when you're planting and growing, because too much water is a bad thing and it can cause suffocation of your plants. It can like kill off your plants and things like that. Again, raised beds, it's a smaller space. It's easier to grow natural and to keep your pest control to a minimum. And then also it's just aesthetically appealing. You know, just seeing these raised beds organized in a straight line, in a block sort of way, it adds a lot of personality, a lot of personality and energy to like your garden space. So these are just like our 6 things of why we encourage people to grow using raised garden beds. So things to think about. These next couple of slides are just what I call what you should have in mind as you're preparing to install a garden space. So number 1, site selection is everything. You want to have a space that receives 8 to 10 hours of sunlight. You want the sun, if anything, to be like southern facing. So what that means is if you're paying attention to the building or your home or where you want to install these garden spaces, you want to make sure that it's on the south side of the building. And a lot of that has to do with the sun trajectory and how it and how the shadows and things happen throughout the growing season, throughout the year. And we found that on the south side of the building, you have more ample sunlight for what you're growing and things like that. You also want to pay attention to trees. Even though we're in the winter months and the trees are dormant, eventually those trees will start to have leaves on them. And if they start to bloom out, leaf out, that's going to create more shade in your garden space. And then you also want to be mindful of where the trees are at, because if the trees themselves, like we have a lot of oak trees here in Albany, and so their roots can grow outside of the ground and start to elevate. And so that can definitely mess up your layout or where your garden space things are at. And then also you want to just pay attention to, like I say, 8 to 10 hours of direct sunlight. And if you don't quite have that, you want to make sure that you have sunlight that's there early in the morning versus the sunlight being in the evening time. And a lot of that has to do with like the heat. So, in the morning sun, it tends to be cooler. It's cooler in the morning anyway. And then if you think about the heat of the day, it's hotter. It's going to put more stress onto your plants. And so you just want to think about that. If you have an option, you want to make sure that the plants are receiving. And then also, oftentimes I tell people too, it's just kind of like sometimes us as humans, we love that get jolt of coffee in the morning or a little bit of caffeine. That's what that sun does for your plant. It helps really perk it up. So having that sun in the morning really helps out a lot. And then again, you just want, just the trajectory of the sunlight, if you can, just being mindful of the east to west sort of direction that the sun flows, how the plant flows. And a lot of that has to do, especially if you're going to grow like sunflowers, like I have in the picture, or tomato plants or things that get a little bit taller. You want to just make sure that you line things up so nothing is ever shaded and everything gets the full amount of sun. Secondly, water. So in relationship to your raised beds, you really want to know where your closest water source is. Like I explained to people that when you are establishing a plant, whether it's from seed or transplant, during the very first 7 to 10 days, you're going to have to water that plant almost on a daily basis, just to make sure that the roots are catch and established in that raised garden bed. And so you want to make sure that your water source is within a good walking distance or a good carrying distance, so to speak, from like your garden space. Like I explained to people that when I first established the garden site that we have at 5th Avenue, we had 1 water spigot for 1.5 acres. And I literally had to have water hose on top of water hose extended all over the garden space just to keep things watered. And that can get that can be very taxing. So if you can, you want to make sure that the water source is close proximity to where your garden space is at for watering. And in addition to that, there are multiple different water strategies that you can use in order just to keep your plants watered. You got good Mother Nature, which is just rainwater falling down. And of course, I'm encouraging people, local government, to tap into your water wells or your water faucets that you might have. You could go old school and just do some basic sort of hand watering with a watering can. At a lot of our in-ground garden spots, we do drip irrigation. We even do it at some of our raised boxes. We've also, as you see from the picture, we use micro sprayers, which kind of mimics rain in a small area, and we're able to have the system set up just to water what's inside the raised garden boxes. And then the last thing that we do, we use what we call Oya pots. And this is just a technique that Native Americans utilize. We use terracotta pots, fill them up with water, bury them inside the raised beds, and then slowly the water seeps out the sides of the terracotta pots, watering the plants below surface, and then also kind of helping to conserve your water. So like the last 3, the drip, the micro sprayers, and the Oyas are really there for water conservation. I guess hand water is there for water conservation because you can only water as much as you can carry, so you're not just going to waste it. And that's another reason, again, why we encourage the raised bed, because water use is really concerted into the garden space that you're growing in. So land. What we try to encourage people, number one, you want to find an area, and if you can, you want it to be weed-free, rock-free, So just take the time if you can. If there is rocks in the area, go ahead and remove them. And if you do have like a weed problem, you can adjust that just by simply with a hoe and a shovel, cleaning the space out. Secondly, you want to make sure that in the spot that's level. What we found, like in the past, is that if it's on a slope, that can cause the water or the nutrients or whatnot that you might use just to run off into the space. Then also, if it's on a slope, sometimes it's just like difficult, like to walk up and down, us to move. So encourage it to be on a level space. And then also, you want a spot that has good drainage. Again, as I was talking about, you want good drainage in the boxes, but you definitely don't want your garden box to be in a space that will puddle up, that will turn into a pond or a lake on heavy rain days. So you definitely don't want that to happen. So you want your location to make sure that it drains really well. And again, something that works properly for you. So this picture here is like a shot of our garden that we created at the Georgia National Fair, and how we made sure that everything was level, ready to go before we got started with like growing, creating this garden space for like growing food. So those are some things to have in mind when determining your site. So again, it's about your sunlight, close to the water, and what does the layout of the land looks like before you begin to grow food or to build these raised garden boxes. So building the boxes, things just to like kind of consider. So what we found that on average, that you really want your garden box to be between 3 to 4 feet wide. And you want it to be that distance in particular, just because how we talk about the garden boxes is that you want it to, where you'll be able to reach in comfortably into the box, actually be able to work it where you can see work both sides of it. Again, we talked about soil compaction. And then in terms of height, you want it to be a minimum of 10 inches, but no higher than 24 to like 48 inches. And the reason why you want that particular depth is that is really tied into what you're going to plant or what you're going to grow. I tell most people, visualize a carrot. You think about a carrot growing in particular, like the length of a carrot is going to be a minimum of probably about 8 inches. So you want to make sure you have enough room for that carrot to grow if you have it in your raised like garden boxes, and things like that. And so then the other thing is that in terms of length of your boxes, it can be as long as you want to make it. Most of ours are just 8 feet long, but we have like some spaces where we built garden boxes, like here in Albany. There's 4C Academy, which is a college and career academy that we did a garden installation for. Their garden boxes are 16 feet long. We've had other spaces that have been like longer, so you can make the box as long as you want to make it, but we just encourage you that you only make it 3 to 4 feet wide, just so it's easier to work in and outside of the garden boxes. Now, you can be as creative as you want to be on your raised boxes. So we've seen some that are triangular. We've seen some where people made them like arc shapes, butterflies, using like different materials and things like that. And I'll talk about it in a little bit, but you're not limited into your creativity. So I always tell people that your garden space can be as diverse as you want to make it. Your raised beds can be as diverse as you want to make it. You can have as much flexibility and creativity that you want to have. But one of the core things that you just want to do is make sure it doesn't get any wider than about 3 to 4 feet, just again, to make it more accessible for like you to work it. And again, not feel like the step inside. And I'm emphasizing the 3 to 4 feet because early on, when we first started doing these garden projects, individuals will have, like railroad ties, and they're like 8 feet long, and they have like these big garden spaces that are like 8 feet by 8 feet. And if you're trying to, especially working with young people or individuals with disability, it'd be very hard to really work the center of those spaces without you stepping into the garden space, and that leads like the compaction, right? And so you can be, again, as creative as you want to be. And then we also have like some that are more elevated and raised beds and things like that. But we're really going to focus in today on our on the ground, 4 feet by 8 feet sort of garden spaces, garden boxes that we build out into the community. All right. So again, just like the creativity, be as shapes, same, rectangular, that sort of thing. All right. So when it comes to building your garden box, we really want you to think about like the material that you use. So some core things that we suggest that most people have on hand when doing these raised beds is, number one, to have some sort of what we call a weed barrier or some sort of way of lining the bottom of your garden box. We use a lot of landscape fabric just because it's easier for us to use to buy a roll, because most times we're doing spots that are like 20 feet by 20 feet. But you could just use a landscape fabric, roll it underneath your garden beds. We prefer the professional grade because we found that the cheaper ones tend to deteriorate over time, or you tend to tear them quicker as you're prepping the bed for the next growing season. Or you can do like cardboard and use cardboard and newspapers in your garden space as a weed barrier. But if you do decide to go to cardboard and a newspaper route, we encourage you to make it at least 2 to 4 inches thick. Because what we found when we did our early days of the school gardens, if you just do 1 or 2 layers, they're biodegradable. They're going to break down over time. And then eventually all that good soil and nutrients that you've created in this box is slowly going to seep down. And so I explain to people, we're creating the right environment for anything to grow. And so if that bottom layer deteriorates, all the grass and the weeds that might be surrounding your space, if you don't have it weeded out, will creep up into your garden box. And we're still to this day dealing with Bermuda grass and nut grass infiltrating some of our school garden spaces. So that weed bear is number one. Number two, think about, and I'm going to go more in depth, but you are able to control the soil mixture for that. So the volume soil for your bed. 3, think about what material that you want to use for your bed. I'm going to emphasize more the wooden way, but we have, like you see from the pictures, people using rocks, pavers, cement blocks, bricks, limbs, logs. You're able to use all that. I put on it to avoid metal siding and pressure treated wood if you're doing it at home. And again, that's just because I know if you've been a homeowner, you'll be able to, when it deteriorates, be able to change it out quicker. Now, there is research showing that pressure treated wood is fine, as long as it has the HT, like Howard and Thomas, stamp on it, showing that it was heat treated. And over the past year, they're not using arsenic and things like that that can leach. And then the last thing that you want to have are some self-tapping wood deck screws. Now, back in the day, we used to have to pre-drill and drill, and that takes up a lot of time. Now you can get self-tapping wood deck screws and be able to screw right into like the wooden frame. Make sure you have those on deck. So that's just your core material that you want to stockpile or have available for assembling your garden beds. So tool-wise, most of the time, I tell most people to have on it either a circular saw or a miter saw or some sort of hand saw to cut the wood. But if you don't have it, don't worry. Most box stores like Home Depot and Lowe's will actually cut the wood for you after you make the purchase. So that makes it just a lot easier. So the only thing that you really need to have is a cordless drill. And I have on there a T25 bit because most of the deck screws that you purchase, they have it set up to use a T25 bit, but you can also find some deck screws where you use like a Phillip drive bit as well. And then the last tool that you want to have is a leveler. Like I talked about before, as you're laying your box in place, you might have to remove some soil just to level things out. So just having that level next to you, just to make sure everything, again, is just a flat 180 as you're growing into the space. It's just some basic tools that you need to have on hand. And again, most of that stuff you can pick up at your local box store. And in some cases, you might already have it in your possession. So again, it's just an easier way for you just to grow food, to build your boxes, just to have on hand. So this is like the 3 core tools that you need: a saw, a drill, and a level. And then of course you already got the wood screws. So when it comes to our garden boxes that we do, again, like I said earlier, we make our box, we have a standard size that we work with and a standard depth that we work with. And this allows for us to construct quicker, know exactly how much lumber we need, how much soil we need, on and so forth. So our boxes are 4 feet wide by 8 feet long, and they're actually between 15 and 16 inches deep. And the reason why we say 15 to 16 inches deep is that when you're stacking the 8x8, 2x8 boards on top of each other, depending upon the lumber yard that it came from, some of them are true to like the width. So you do have some that are actually 8 inches, and some of them are a little bit shorter where they might be like 7.5 inches as far as like the wood itself. So when it says 2x8, it actually might be in actuality 1.34 inches by 7.5 inches, depending upon like the lumber yard where it might have come from. So that adjustment really determines like the depth that we do our garden boxes. So you would need 4 2x8 by 8 foot boards. You will also need 4 2x8 by 4 foot boards. And then you also need 1 4x4, which is 4 inches by 4 inches, 8 foot long board. And this is what we use to cut our braces. And then you also need screws. So again, about 32 of our 3-inch deck screws for you, like your board and your stuff like that. And what I like to do is just lay everything out ahead of time. And when you go to like the Home Depot or Lowe's to get your wood cut, you can tell them those exact measurements that you need, and they will do those cuts for you. And at the end of the day, it's a lot easier if you can get it pre-cut there and just transport it. So once you get to the garden site, all you have to do is like it's simple. But if you have like the means to cut it at home, it can save you like 25 cents a cut, like because that's what they pretty much charge once you're there for them to cut the wood. So soil for these garden beds that we build, again, 15 inches to 16 inches. On average, you're going to need like 1.5 cubic yards of soil or 40 of the 41 cubic foot bags. And I put that on the 2 options because here locally, there are some options where you can go buy bulk compost and you can get it enough to put on the back of a pickup truck and take it to your garden site. Or you might have like the means where you're able to go to like the box store and buy the individual bags. So this just gives you like an estimate of how many bags you would need. Most of the times at the box stores, the bags themselves are either like, I put 1 cubic foot, there might be some that are 2 cubic foot. You could kind of adjust it, like do the math. So, you know, if there were 2 cubic foot size bags, you would need 20 of them instead of 40. And that just kind of helps you, making it real easy for you to figure out how much do you really need. And this fills, again, a 4 foot by 8 foot box that's between 15 inches to 16 inches deep. So again, that's our standard that we use in a lot of our garden spaces. Now, one thing that we do emphasize though, if you do go to like a garden space and pick up stuff, we kind of have like our own special blend. And a lot of this is just, again, what we've kind of found over the years that really helps with making your garden rich, soil rich, diverse, and giving the plants what it needs in order really like to jumpstart and to grow. And we do a mixture for a lot of particular reasons. So again, I talked earlier, just a weed barrier, but then after that, we encourage people to mix in what we call like a soil conditioner or a type of like pine bark mulch. And what that's there for is so that even though we have our beds are 16 inches like deep or 15 inches deep, you do not have to fill the entire bed with soil. You can do a mixture like what I'm about to describe right here of a mixture, so that way you don't have to like spend so much money up front. You can actually utilize some other things that's going to break down over time to make your soil mixture more diverse. The biology around it is really diverse for growing. So this is like the blend that we use in our garden spaces when we have to do like the bag product. Now on the bulk side, we have some partners that already have like the soil mixture that I'm describing here already blended in. So we just go there and just pick it up in bulk. We just call it like our raised bed mix. So if you're doing it at home, number one, you want to have a soil conditioner, whether it's a mulch or a pine bark, just kind of mixed in. And what that is, it's going to break down over time. It's going to add some, what we call like the funguses, the good bacteria at the base. And it also helps with water drainage in your raised box. The second thing that you want to have is a blend of compost. So whether it's your own compost that you're doing at home, like food waste, or you might have access to, cow manure, mushroom compost, or chicken houses, or house manure, horse manure, things like that. Just compost it down. third thing that you want is what we call perlite or vermiculite, and these are just small volcanic rocks that are just breaking down, but this helps with aeration. So you want your water, your soil mixture to be aerated as well. You don't want it to be too compacted, again, to suffocate the roots. So you want that. Then you also add in like a peat moss or a coconut core to it. And this is more for like water retention, and what I like to say, nutrient retention. Because as we talk about growing food, growing fruits and vegetables, or vegetables in particular, you're going to have a fertilizer plan as well, just because certain plants have certain fertilizer requirement. And again, that's something I go more in depth with when I do those what to plant in the spring workshops and what to plant in the summertime workshop. And then the last thing that we encourage people to do is just put like a thin layer of either pine straw or wheat straw just around like the top layer of like your raised bed. And again, this has a lot to do with having the water stay around like the base of the plant, allow for less evaporation, just kind of keeping the water where it needs to be at, like for growing the plants and things like that. So this is our basic like soil blend, again, that we utilize in our raised beds. Done this again multiple times at the Sunbelt Ag Expo. We've done it at the Georgia National Fair. We just bring in bags, products, and we allow for people to do the mix right there. And if you guys were here with me, we actually would build our own mix, so you guys get to see what it looks like, what it takes, and the ratio of it, being that it's like, again, 40 cubic foot bags. If I was to do the math, it almost would be 8 bags of the soil conditioner, about 10 bags of the compost. It would be another like 10 or so bags of the perlite. I mean, like 5 or so bags of the perlite, and then about 8 to 10 bags of the peat moss, kind of like just mixed in together. So it's almost like a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 sort of ratio, with compost being the heaviest ingredient that we utilize, because that's a slow releasing fertilizer into the mix. So when it comes to planting, what we recommend that people do for their raised beds is use a technique that's called square foot gardening. It's a simple technique to do. Basically, in a nutshell, you're dividing your garden space into smaller 1 foot by 1 foot growing spaces. And again, it just makes it easier just to lay things out aesthetically, makes it easier like to teach, especially young people, like how to grow food, again, like in a small space. And it also helps you with determining, how many seeds you might need, how many transplants you might need as you're laying out your garden space and things like that. So you can do more research on like square foot gardening. And it was also developed by an engineer by the name of Mel Bartholomew in the 1970s. And again, it's just an efficient way to grow into the space. So this is just some of the benefits that we see why we encourage people to do square foot gardening. Again, it's just easy to start. It's easy math. You don't have to worry about, because we got the soil mixture ready to go. It's low maintenance. The fertility is there. They're definitely designed for raised beds. It's adaptable to even utilizing like small 5-gallon buckets. You can use your old cat litter buckets, things like that. And the most important thing, you get a high yield, because you're growing things very close, intense, really close proximity to each other, and you're maximizing the growing space. So rather than being just like in a linear row, by planting things in these smaller little plots, you're able to grow just more tomatoes in a space, more lettuce in a space, more spinach, as you kind of see just off the picture and things that I've shared. So this is just a quick sort of breakdown of, for your spring garden, what you can actually plant per square in the square foot gardening system. So for like 1 square, you can get 16 carrot plants planted. You can look at like some microgreens, some radishes planted in that 1 square. Also, onions, spinach, turnip, you can do 9 of those plants per square. So again, you can do more diversity. In 1 square, you can plant 1 lettuce, 1 transplant of Swiss chard. 4, I'm sorry. Then you can also look at, for 1 square, you can do 1 cucumber plant, 1 pepper plant, 1 potato, strawberry, and kale. Now, when it comes to broccoli, like some plants, you need more than just your 1 foot by 1 foot, just because those plant requirements, their roots get so big that they need more space in order to grow out. And so for those, it's a small number, but it also allows for you to grow more, again, diverse, more in the space. So we found that rather than doing a 1 foot spacing or 1 square for your broccoli, cabbage, collards, eggplants, and some varieties of peppers, especially like your bell peppers, you really need to use 2 spaces, 2 square spaces per plant. Then if you're doing tomatoes or summer squash, because they grow so big, the roots get so established, we encourage people to do 4 squares per plant if you're doing those. So has anybody ever seen like a zucchini plant or a squash plant growing? Their leaves get huge. So you want to make sure that it has like enough space for that plant to grow and to thrive in that area. So the last piece is more of like if we were hands-on, we would actually spend the next like 10 or 15 minutes really constructing a raised garden bed. And again, with technology and things like that. So what I'm going to do is actually, once this is done and completed, I'm actually going to videotape myself putting a raised bed together. And then as an added piece, as an amendment to this workshop on our website, there'll actually be a video of me assembling these steps right here. So that way you'll be able to watch it, see exactly how we did it, and know how to do it for yourself. So number one, again, you just want to like make sure your area is level. And I got a question in the chat box. Okay, thank you. All right. So you want to just make sure that the area is like level to begin with. Secondly, you want to lay down your either your cardboard, your newspaper, whatever your weed barrier is for that area space. You want to go ahead and lay that out flat in areas. We've actually, it just makes it a lot easier to go ahead and get that in place before you get started. Just lay out your space for aesthetic reasons and things like that. And again, a recommendation, what we found, sometimes when we first started doing the garden spaces, we would just put the weed barrier, the cardboard, just the size of the bed. But we found that it's better if you can extend it out about like 2 to 3 inches on the outside perimeter of the bed to kind of also help kill off the grass that's surrounding the bed, because everything that to grow, we need water and sunlight. And so by this barrier is going to block the sunlight and things like that. And the other key piece is, if you look at this picture and you see where the person's hand is at, on the wood, it's called, it's like there's like a groove for your wood. And we call it the crown. And you want to make sure that the crown of the board is facing inward into the inside of your garden box. What that does is that if it's facing the outward, that crown over time will start to warp. And if it warps, it's going to warp in the direction that the groove of that crown is going. And so you want to, if it's going to warp, you want it to warp inward versus bowing outward. And so that's one of the key things that we make sure that as you are screwing your woods and stuff together, pay attention to the crown. And if you look at that picture, you kind of can see it looks like a little rainbow groove happening. You want to make sure that, again, that crown is pointed inward as you are screwing the boxes and screwing the wood and lumber together. That's very key, very important for you to do that, because again, you don't want your lumber to bow out. All right. So the second thing, all right, so whenever we build our boxes, we start by assembling the shorter size first. So in that layout, you have wood that's going to be 2x8, that's 4 feet long. You want to go ahead and take the 4-inch by 4-inch post, that's 15 inches, lay it flat onto the ground. And then you want to take one of those 4-foot boards. You want to push it to the end where they're flushed on the end and put 2 screws on the outside of the board, screwing them right into the 4-inch by 4-inch post, that's 15 inches. So you want it flush to the end, one done, and then after you do that one, you're going to screw the next one, and then you're going to end up with the 2 sides, one of the sides done where they're 2x8, 4 feet long, basically stacked on top of each other, screwed into the 15-inch to 16-inch boards, and that's going to make your size. So you do that part first. And then the second thing that you do, once you've done that, then you attach like the 8-foot boards. What I like to do, especially if everything's on a level ground and I have the 4-foot sides attached to the 4-inch by 4-inch post, is I turn them upright. I like basically like lift them up into the air because it gives me leverage, and it also just makes it easier to line up my 8-foot board versus screwing the 8-foot board directly onto the ground. And so as you see by this picture, this is just what we do at all the sites, is that we just flip them up 4 feet. The 4-foot board is elevated. We run the 8-foot board across the bottom, again, making it flush. Screw the nails, screw the screws in. We do that on both sides, flip it over, do the same thing on the other side, and voila, we have our raised garden beds. They're assembled and ready to go. So to close off this presentation, just want to give you like some sources for what you're looking for. If you're here in Dougherty County, and if you're outside of Dougherty County, you could probably go to like some other lumber yards and things like that. So in terms of our lumber, we recommend people either go like to the Short and Park or Shivers Lumber. There's some local lumber yards here. Or if you want to, you could just go to Lowe's or Home Depot and pick up the wood choices that you need. In terms of the soil mixture, whether it's like the bulk stuff that you're looking for, we send people either to Mark's Greenhouse or Lawn and Barber, or you can go to Kanye's Rock Yard there. And all three of those places, you can get it in bulk. And then also, if you are looking for like another source, there is like Soil 3. We actually got started using that product when we were doing the work in Houston County at the Georgia National Fair. They also carry things in bulks that you can use. And then we also encourage people, if you are going to do this work, raised garden beds, some core tools that you want to have in your tool shed, or in my case, into the back of the storage unit. You want to make sure you have like a digging fork, and that just kind of helps with like breaking up the soil, turning it. You want to have, of course, like a watering can or some sort of like water source for you to use. Again, a digging tool, like a hand trowel for like digging for your transplants. And then also you want to have like some type of pruning shears, because especially with your tomato plants and some of your pepper plants, you might want to just prune off like the bottom leaves as your plant starts growing. So you want to make sure you have that on hand in your tool shed and your kit for like growing food and things like that. So just as a closer, we do have some more upcoming workshops in the next couple weeks. So February 18th, I'll be doing a plant in the spring garden. I will literally be going plant by plant, how we plant them in the ground, how we plant them in raised garden boxes, how we plant them in containers. And I'm going to go plant by plant, and even go in depth into some of the pest issues that you might deal with the plant, and even talk about a fertilizing plan that's related to each of these plants that you can grow for your spring garden. So that workshop there will actually probably be more of about an hour and a half. Then after that, I'll be doing another, what I call just basic vegetable gardening basics, where I just go through just more in depth some of the things you should know about, from like site selection, basic fertilizing, basic choices between raised beds or in ground. In the March, I'll be doing another workshop about summer gardens, similar to the spring, where I'm gonna go plant by plant, what to plant into your summer garden, in ground, raised beds, or in container, fertilizer schedule. And in the beginning of April, I'm gonna do an in-depth conversation just on like pest control. You know, what pests you normally see out into your garden space, what are some biological solutions you can do, what are some conventional solutions that you can do to deal with like your pest problem into your raised like garden beds and things like that. So again, this is our basic sort of contact information for Flint River Fresh. So if you want to like just follow up and just reach out to us, how to connect with us in the office, via email, on social media, and then also on the chat box. Like I said before, today's presentation will be on our website. So you can go to, we have a link that's a do-it-yourself DIY toolkit, that this will be available for you to view at your own discretion. You can share the video, share the presentation with the people that you work with, to your friends and family, anyone that's excited about trying to build their own raised garden bed and garden box. And like I said, I'm gonna do like a small 5 minute or 10 minute video showing you guys how I actually assemble the boxes like in real time so people can really see how long does it take to assemble it and do this.